I mean, that's what that means to me. Like, just celebrate anything for any reason, pat yourself for any reason, anytime. Which I get that. You know what I mean? I get doing that. I don't mind it because social media-wise, it's, look, we're talking about it now. So maybe I just brought that up and you were like, hey, maybe AEW's coming to my town. And then maybe you go buy a ticket. You know, all because we talked about that news. That happens. That really works. So it's, you know, I can understand why they're doing it, I guess. But yeah, it is kind of silly in a way. Tonight's Monday Night Raw preview. WWE Raw takes place from Nassau Coliseum on Long Island, New York. Tonight, we're going to get the fallout of Crown Jewel. No matches have been announced for tonight's Raw, but WWE Champion and new Red Brand superstar Brock Lesnar is set to appear, according to Wrestling Inc. and WWE.com. WWE has not posted a preview for tonight's show, which is weird because they normally post all these little things, but tonight they don't have that. They have the Fiend Bray Wyatt slated there for like the ticket sales in the New York press. Seth Rollins, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, AJ Styles. They had all of them listed to appear originally, but there, again, is no set booking. It's possible NXT superstars will appear on tonight's Raw to continue the Survivor Series build that began on SmackDown. That could also happen. But there's really no other... there's nothing, man. They're not saying anything about what they're doing. And then maybe they don't know because of what happened in Saudi Arabia or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Escaping Arabia. Escaping Arabia. It's Arabian night. I already talked a lot about Seth Rollins. I don't need to talk about him anymore. I did a whole thing about him on being on Corey Graves' show, and we basically talked about how Seth is ridiculous, comparing all the fans to, they're all angry Twitter people. Just really weird. You know, this really reminds me of Bret Hart. Like, this is the most, like, if anybody remembers when Bret Hart started to become not cool anymore, remember that? Remember how we loved Bret Hart? I can't believe that other people aren't constantly making this comparison. When Bret Hart was, like, the fans were angry at WWE, you know, after Hogan beat Yokozuna and Bret Hart lost, and that whole year they gave Bret Hart the King of the Ring to pay him back. All the fans were cheering for Bret. Then they tried to push Lex Luger as the American hero guy and over Bret Hart, but then the people still just wouldn't accept it, and they were still cheering more for Bret Hart. And finally, they gave the belt to Bret Hart at WrestleMania 10, and everybody cheered for Bret, and Bret was the fighting champion of the company until Diesel came along, and then WWE put the belt on Diesel. But, you know, Bret Hart was this cheered for, revered guy, and then he took that big break, and he came back, and he was just such a whiner, you know, like such a whiny guy, like. And this was real life. Like, this was, I mean, I know that at some point they enhanced the character to be this prick. But before that, you know, Bret's like this in real life to this day. It's like, well, you know, I was the best guy I ever did that, you know, like Bret's like his own biggest fan, you know what I mean? And I love Bret Hart, but you know what I mean? He's like this. You know, I was the guy that did that. I went down there and old Shawn Michaels didn't want to do it and Vince didn't want to do it. And then they finally listened to me and look what happened. You know, like he's very pat himself on the back, like, you know. But eventually that would become, like, hated by the fans. They started, like, resenting Bret Hart. And then when Stone Cold was like, shut up, you whiny bitch, like, people started popping like crazy for that. And that's why, another reason why Stone Cold Steve Austin got over was because they had Bret Hart as the opposite of that. Everybody always talks about about Stone Cold and Vince McMahon. But the first heel that really got Stone Cold to that level was Bret Hart. You know, Bret Hart was flipping from a face to a heel. And way before the whole, like, bleeding in the ring and Bret attacks Ken Shamrock at WrestleMania 13, it was before that. There was still people cheering for Bret, but there was a lot of people that thought he was a prick. and it changed. This totally reminds me of that. Like, if only they had a Bret Hart. I mean, if only they had a Stone Cold around. If only they had some male, like, badass who was going around whatever. And you could be like, yeah, why don't you complain more about the fans on Twitter, you bitch? Like, that's all you do, Seth. I'm Seth Rollins. Like, if they got somebody to do that, like, that person would become so over, it's insane. And it would be all because Seth is so annoying right now. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Seth Rollins right now is Bret Hart from 1996 and 1997. You're looking at Bret Hart as Seth Rollins. And, I mean, if you could just have the baby face to come in to be awesome, and then he could flip heel, we'd be good to go. But we don't have the baby face. I'm telling you right now, if they had Stone Cold Steve Austin, like, you could even put Stone Cold in that spot. Imagine if Stone Cold Steve Austin came around and got on Raw and got on the mic and was like, that's all you do, Seth. Blah, whine, and cry. You bitch. Like, and Stone Cold did something like that, dude, the crowd would lose their minds. And then he stunned Seth Rollins. Like, Seth Rollins is the Weasley, measly little prick. You know, like, I mean, dude, you put Seth Rollins in a wheelchair like Vince McMahon and Bret Hart back in the day, like, all that stuff with the title and the belt being wheeled out on a wheelchair, like, I see it so clear as day, man. I see it so clear as day. Seth Rollins is a heel right now. He's becoming a heel. He's such a heel in the fans' eyes now, and not as in he's being a heel on purpose. It's just people hate him right now. Like, he's worse than Reigns. Like, I mean, he's not worse than Reigns in the way that he's been shoved down our throats. Nobody has ever been shoved down anybody's throats as much as Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns will go down as the biggest shoved-in-your-face throat motherfucker ever. But nobody has ever complained, bitched, and moaned more than Seth Rollins, other than maybe Bret Hart back in that time, if everybody remembers it. He was really confused. Like, why do these people like Steve Austin? You know, I don't get it. You know, and then they finally flipped him into that character. I don't know. It's just so clear as day to me. It's almost unbelievable. What's up, everybody? Listen to full episodes of Not Enough Marks podcast on my Patreon, patreon.com/Joe Cronin Show. A new episode, episode 3, is up right now, about 50 minutes long. To enjoy more of it, go listen now in pregame before Raw. 370 patrons and counting. And I do want to also shout out to all the brand new patrons who are over there. So thank you to the people who signed up or re-signed up this week, including Kenzo Amore, Eugene Gelfman, Brandon Harbin, Robert Hall, and everybody else will be getting shout-outs tonight, of course. See you guys over there. Go download the podcast to your phone, available only on patreon.com/Joe Cronin Show. Use the Patreon app on your mobile phone or tablet or wherever, or on the browser. If you also sign up in the correct tier on Patreon, you'll also get not only Not Enough Marks, you'll also get Till Death Do Us podcast with me and my wife, the Corrupted podcast every single week, and Morning Madness, Final Frontier News, After Dark, and the Honestly podcast with me and Tommy, and a whole bunch more on Patreon.